Life, but steady. You see this nanny life. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of a Nanny's Life podcast. Thank you so much for being here. This week, we are starting a little miniature series, if you will. We're going to talk about pivoting as nannies. So, first, we're going to talk about pivoting into the nanny career. And then on the next episode, we'll talk about pivoting out of the nanny career. And I'm so excited because I'm not alone today, y'all. I got a friend who is joining me, and she actually reached out to me and was like, we should talk about this. And I was like, you know what, friend? You are absolutely right. So, y'all, welcome Jess to the potty. Hey, friend.
Hey everybody, so happy to be here.
Yes, welcome, welcome. So happy to have you. So glad you reached out. I think your experience is very unique in that you have transitioned into and are preparing to eventually transition out of the industry. I think it's a conversation more nannies need to have with other industries who may or may not be considering the transition. But before we get into any of that, I would love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself. Tell the people a little bit about you, where you're based, and what your nanny experience is.
Everyone, my name is Jess Gabor. I am originally from Chicago, Illinois, but I now live in San Diego, California. And in between that, I lived in Colorado for a few years. And so I am currently a nanny. I started as a Montessori preschool teacher, and during my summers off from the school, I would actually nanny for our students because our school was closed. And one summer, I just decided not to go back to teaching. And I have been nannying ever since 2016. In between that time, I have met other nannies that have told me about the International Nanny Association and all the continuing education and professional development opportunities that is available to domestic workers. And that just really opened my eyes to becoming a newborn care specialist. And
That's impressive.
I'm here at 10 years later.
Yeah. That's really
Thank you.
impressive. I feel like I would love to get into NCS work maybe in my next gig because I am a fully nocturnal human being. So we're definitely gonna have to chat more about that offline.
Actually, I was going to say too, what's actually interesting about the NCS work is I mostly did daytime work for that. I do have overnight experience. However, working as a nanny and being hired as an NCS, a lot of parents really needed me to establish those daytime routines and would take me on travel with them. So
Nice.
I'm really blessed in that way that I got a lot of my nights at home still doing this work. But yeah, so a lot of my work was establishing the daytime routine so that parents could understand what to do for the rest of the day and into the night.
That might be my next chapter, my next life in this industry.
Yeah, right?
Okay, so we're talking about the idea of transitioning into nanny life. And one of the biggest reasons I want to have this conversation today is that when you go on social media, like Instagram, TikTok, people tend to glorify nanny life as an easy way to make a lot of money. And I think that is oversimplifying the work to a great degree. So I just want to get a little more clear about what to expect when you're transitioning into this industry. And to start that off, let's think about who typically is a prime candidate to transition into nanny life, in your opinion.
That's a great question, and it requires a pretty broad response. Um, I would say the first half of that, I actually was one of those people that thought transitioning from teaching to nannying was going to be so much easier and I would make so much more money because of my summer experiences nannying. Summer nannying is way different than year round nannying. Summer nannying is like, who are the president of the camp? It is so much fun. I mean, and the parents are in better mood, they're much more open ended and flexible. But then when the school year hits, that was a lot different. That was much different coming into nannying than I expected. It still felt easier than teaching But the demand, I would say the energy of the parents is what shifts and what makes it a lot different. To answer though the other part of the question of who's a good candidate, I would say anybody that has had experience working with children in a professional setting, whether that's like camp counseling or you've been in a daycare or you have had some sort of work with children with other adults watching you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think if you're somebody that is just, an office administrator that has a couple of nieces and nephews, and then you decide you want to be a nanny, I don't know if that's going to be a good fit for you. I do think the experience being in some sort of facility with other childcare professionals that watching you work with kids is like a really good signifier, even if that's just like a camp counselor situation or a babysitter. If you got a good response and you felt like in your soul, like you're somebody that's good with maintaining a routine, listening to parents telling you what to do, being able to even like put out little fires. Gosh, it's such a broad question.
That's fair. It is a very broad question, and the reason I ask that question is because I think when we look at transitioning into the industry, there are a few transferable skills, right? Any sort of management is going to be helpful. Any sort of, like you said, staying on routine, staying on schedule is helpful, but I think one of the things that a lot of people forget to consider is that you have to like children a lot. You cannot do this work without being a fan of little people because, when you're like an aunt or an uncle, you show up to the birthday party, you do 3, 4 hours, you have a blast, you're exhausted, you need a drink after. This is probably not going to be the pivot for you because the novelty wears off and you have to have a deep appreciation for children and a desire to communicate with them and to hang out with them because all the other things around you are going to be tough, right? Or could be tough. The weather might not be on your side, the schedule might not be on your side, the kids may have tantrums, the parents may be asking for things that you can't necessarily deliver. So, for me, anyway, falling back on really appreciating hanging out with the children and communicating with them and creating a bond has been the single reason I've been able to stay in the industry. So if you're coming into the industry, just please really like children because it's necessary.
I didn't consider that aspect of because I love children so much that it's like I'm so desensitized to that fact. But yeah, you have to love children to do this.
No, and it's the thing is people who don't spend a lot of time around children don't really know how much they do or don't enjoy children. And so if you haven't spent enough time around children, if you haven't been around children when you were frustrated or when they were frustrated, outside of the birthday party where you unwrap gifts and eat all the sugar, if you haven't had that sort of experience, because coming into this industry, wow, I didn't know I was going to be on a soapbox like this, but coming into this industry, you're not only spending a lot of time with small children, but these are small children who are not related to you, who you don't already have a bond with, who you're not, tied to for life in the way that we are with our family kids or our friends' kids. So it's like you have to form this bond with a child that you don't know, whose parents are not necessarily your friends or your family. And you also have to maintain a professional relationship with the adults in the circumstance. So it's a lot.
I never considered those aspects going into being a nanny. Like I said, going back to the summer nanny aspect, I just was like, this is what it's like. I could do this all year.
Yeah, that's fair. And I used to, when I worked with school age kids, the summer was like Christmas for me. Like I would count down to summertime because the school year is a grind. It really, really is. And you don't always have, like you said, the free time and the autonomy to like do what you want with the kids or even do what the kids want to do, right? If they have different obligations, different extracurriculars. So we used to make like a summer bucket list of like all the things we didn't have time to do during the school year. And we would get that done in the summer. So I totally agree. Summertime is It's beautiful.
Yeah, it truly is.
It truly, truly is. Okay, so now that we have established who is an ideal candidate to transition into nanny life, let's talk about why someone would do that. I've seen reasons like pay, reasons like autonomy, reasons like mental health. But what's your take on that?
So when I was a teacher, um, I honestly thought I was going to make more money. That after a couple years of doing that, that just wasn't the case. And I found that being a nanny during my summers, not only, was it more lucrative, but I still got to utilize my skill set that I acquired in college. I still got to utilize the things that I had been learning the last few years. And I got to do it in a way less stressful environment in the regard of like I was really impressing parents, like so much easier. Like my director who maybe came in to see us a couple times a year. And so I would say that's the biggest factor for me. I'm not somebody that like loves attention in a negative way. Like I don't need it. But when it comes to our jobs and what we do professionally, I think that validation and what you're doing is so important. And to be like recognized on a weekly basis, daily basis, even through the children felt so much more rewarding to me. And so that's what made me stay.
That's good. I feel like so I'm a love language girly and words of affirmation is my biggest love language. So I totally feel you. I never really took into account how when you're teaching, especially like older kids, they just get on the bus and come in the room and get on the bus and go home. So you don't get that constant feedback from families, but you also probably don't get it from administration because they're like so busy administrating. That's interesting. I've seen a lot of people comment too that like being outside is really helpful to them,
I was
like being able to go outside randomly. Yeah, you can talk more about it.
I love the control I have over the day. In that way, I need to be outside. I was listening to your podcast this week and how you were talking about like you love going on walks and being in the garden, and that's just I totally vibe with that. I just love going on those walks with the babies and being at the park and going to a music class or going to a my gym class. Just it's such a nice balance of like being on your own and seeing people in little spurts. It's like just enough. And then also versus working at a school, I was working with women. It was all women. I love my women, but us all working together, it was, oh my God, I feel like I'm in school again as a teacher, dealing with kids. So it was really nice to just kind of work on my own.
That's so funny because I worked in a daycare for 5 months total because I could not handle feeling like you said, like I was back in high school, like all of these dynamics, it was not working for me. No, I feel you. And some days it's just me and the kid or me and the kids.
Yeah,
Some days we don't do people.
and
And
that's
that is a
fine.
beautiful thing to be able to elect. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Are you doing carpool or are you going into the parent pit carpool?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Agreed. Agreed. And also the autonomy is nice because I know being in a system, there are certain standards and certain goals you have to meet in certain ways. I know they have changed the math a lot in schools. Cannot relate. So I do think it is beautiful to be able to not only control what you do during the day, but tailor it to the needs of the kid rather than just doing one big lesson and hoping that everybody can vibe with it. I think that's absolutely fair. So let's talk about how to transition into the nanny industry. Would you recommend someone transitioning into the industry immediately go and connect with an agency? Or would you recommend they try to get a job from word of mouth? Or what method do you think people should take when they're trying to come over and do this work?
I have found that I have gotten really lucky with referrals. Whenever I've gotten a referral, I have just gotten the best clients because they come in feeling like they kind of already know me because they knew this person. I got some background on them from my person. Like the people that I work for right now, I'm in a 5-year contract and I actually was friends with their doula.
5 years is a long time. Okay.
Yeah. We got a year left. I've been with them 4 years now. but I knew their doula, and she recommended me. And so it was really beautiful how that all worked out. However, I will say that I have gone the agency route, and I've gone the agency route twice. One experience with an agency I didn't love because she talked my rates down so that she could still make what she needed. I told her that I wanted, X amount hourly. And she told me, well, that's a lot to ask for just starting out with them. So you may want to ask for this. And then after some time goes by and they get to know you, then you can ask for that. I took that as she didn't want to tell them my actual needs because she still wanted to make her rates that she needed from them.
Hmm.
Like she's like, oh, she charges this much, but then I'm gonna charge you guys for my services.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of I mean, I saw right through that right away. So I was like, so that was one experience I had. But another experience I had actually was Seaside Staffing.
Represent.
Dara Yates is incredible. She truly understands the needs of us, where we're coming from, our perspective, because she was once a nanny. And she's really been a trailblazer in this industry. And she really advocates for the caregiver. So I have found those two spectrums of people like Dara who really advocate and care for us, and then people who just are running a business, which no disrespect. You're running a business. Gotta do what you gotta do.
That's so interesting to me, specifically because from where I sit as someone who has only ever nannied professionally, I have not been in a classroom setting, I don't have a teaching degree. In my mind, and when I see job ads, even former teachers make more money because you're bringing something additional to the table. You still gonna have to do this nanny work. You're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to maintain the home in the way that the clients expect. You're gonna have to meet the needs of the children in the ways that the clients expect. But you also have a wealth of knowledge, and you can actually lesson plan and implement, and you're seeing from a different lens. And I've always known parents to want someone with an education background to work with them. So I think it's fascinating. But like you said, people are running a business, and if they think that they are going to miss out on a client or a placement fee, sometimes these things happen. But I'm glad you had a great experience with Seaside.
Yeah. I was never actually placed with Seaside, but she did help me when I first moved to San Diego. She told me about Trustline, how an agency won't actually take me unless I'm not in the Trustline database. She told me about all the resources out here that I needed to be successful. But then I ended up getting the nanny job that I have now through the referral. So I ended up not needing her. However, I saw a stark difference between the way she spoke to me versus the other agency.
Which is important. It really is
Definitely.
important. And a lot
Yeah.
of times half the battle, you know, because you don't know what you don't know. Also, I love referrals from other caregivers. I don't know how I feel about referrals from clients simply because that can sometimes be loaded with certain expectations, if that makes sense. Obviously, we love to have a glowing recommendation and all that, but when a caregiver recommends a family and they're like, these are good folks, that's the best job. The best job.
I'm going to say thank you for differentiating that actually. Referrals from other caregivers. I definitely
Yeah, I
agree.
wish we could get a system together, but that would be hard to manage if we had a system where you could research families according to their former caregivers and household staff. One day, maybe one day. Okay, so let's talk about realistic nanny life in comparison to other industries like teaching, because first of all, I don't know how much time beyond the school day teachers typically spend working. So if you could tell me what a teacher schedule is like, then we can compare it to nanny life.
I actually was a Montessori teacher for 3 to 6 year olds. So I didn't have to take lesson planning home with me or work in that way. not like a typical public school teacher. Because what's really beautiful about the Montessori philosophy actually is that the room was actually divided into, it's like 6 sections. It's practical life skills, sensorial, math, geography, science, and art. And it goes in a sequence. It flows around the room. And in the middle of the room is like a big carpet. It's like the community area. What's beautiful about it is that children can go and look at the shelves and see what's available. There's usually 2 to 3 teachers in the classroom, and they come and get a teacher and ask for a lesson on something if they don't know how to do it. And all the lessons that are presented on the shelves we actually have training on. And so prior to obviously to becoming the teacher. And so we just have it stored in our mind how to give the lesson on what they're choosing. And it's a one-on-one process in the moment of following the child and being more of a guide for them rather than a teacher. Like, well, we're a teacher, but we like to refer to it as a guide or a directress. And what's beautiful about that too is that all the work is there in the classroom. We don't have to take it home with us. We don't have to plan. All the lessons are there. All the planning is presented already. The only things that we really plan are like group activities or like certain art projects for certain like parts of the year, holidays, seasons, birthdays, things like that.
That sounds like where it's at.
Yeah.
Because the
That's actually
stories
why
I
I
hear
chose
of teachers.
Montessori. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually worked as a tutor for a Montessori school when I was in college. That was my work study. And I thought it was so cool seeing the kids with the clipboard and they're like, I've done these things and I have these left, but they would take a break to read with me. I was an America Reads, America Counts tutor. But I'm glad you explained that to the people because not everybody's familiar. And I do think Montessori is one of the closer teaching styles to nanny life. You know, you learn how to scaffold, how to build upon what the kids are interested in. But how many hours a week would you say then, as a Montessori teacher, were you working?
I was working 40 to 45 hours a week, definitely. I was there, I would get there at 7 a.m. and I wouldn't leave until 4:30. We would get like 30-minute breaks. We would all rotate each other. But
Hmm.
even still, sometimes I was getting there at like 6:45 just to prepare myself, the class, whatever. Yeah, so we were there a lot. I definitely wasn't, a lot of that was my choice to get there early or to
Hmm.
be more proactive about certain things than I probably needed to be.
It's you being like, I probably didn't need to do that much, but I did that much.
Yeah.
I love it. But the truth is that over here in nanny life, as you know, most people pull 10-hour days on a regular. It's not uncommon for a job to require 50 hours a week as a base. And it's not uncommon for families to also be like, we'd love if you do nights and weekends occasionally so we can have the same continuity of care for our kids. So I do feel like there's a higher hour or time commitment in nanny life. And for me, I'm getting old. So that's probably part of it. But because there's a higher time commitment for nanny life, I have less time for other things because I don't have it at the end of the day. So for me, it does affect my social relationships, friendships, hanging out with my family and stuff. But I could imagine teaching can be equally draining.
I would say that nannying is more draining.
Good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely say that. Teaching was draining in its own ways too. I think the energies of dealing with adults more is what
Mm,
took me out of it quicker.
that is fair.
Adults in different facets, parents, coworkers, directors. On top of that, my preschool was actually located inside of a high school. The last 2 years that I was working there, they decided to make my class into the high school's lab class curriculum. So they installed a double-sided window for the high schoolers to observe us like 3 times a week. And then sometimes they would come in groups of like 2 to 3 and like do stuff with us. And I hated it.
I would hate that too.
I did not like working with high schoolers. I did not like having to coordinate lesson plans with the high school teachers. I just was like, I did not sign up for this.
That sounds like Grey's Anatomy to me. Like, this is a teaching hospital. Yikes. That's interesting.
While nannying is more takes more of your time and energy in different ways, I would say teaching, you're dealing with a lot of different facets of like human interaction.
I'm getting the feeling we are both introverts, friend. You're like all these people. Okay, so also another thing people compare a lot is money. So let's talk about typical wage expectations. Now, obviously, y'all listening, this is going to vary greatly depending where you're located, the nature of the job you're doing, the type of family that you're working with, and the amount of experience that you have. So we'll try to tailor this to you're a new nanny, but maybe a former educator or a former daycare teacher. And we'll say it's a family with 2 children and you'll be working full time. Do we think that the wages are going to end up being comparable to a teacher's salary or significantly higher or significantly lower?
Let's scenario this to be also like you live in like Los Angeles.
I like it.
Okay. Yeah. Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. If you're a former teacher coming into nannying, you should be making more than you were as a teacher, like significantly. No question.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell a little bit of my business here. So y'all know there's a man in this house that I stay with, and his family is full of educators. They're all teachers. I mean, just everybody teaches. And a lot of the questions I get or got, not really as much anymore. It's been a lot of years, but I'm always asked, why don't you just go into a classroom? Why don't you just sign up to be a teacher? We live in a state where we have no teachers and they're pretty much letting people in the classroom without full certification. They're always asking, why don't I go into teaching? And I'm like, I could not take the pay cut to being a first year teacher after being where I am here now as a nanny. And I think it's a shame, a low down dirty shame that teachers don't make more money, especially in public schools in cities like Atlanta. But it is what it is. As a teacher, you have a lot less control over what you make. As a nanny, you can seek certain families, you can seek certain positions that are higher paying. You're gonna work for it. But as a teacher, it's I imagine a little more limited because the salary is what they're offering, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then also they compare your education and your background to the other teachers that you're working with, your colleagues, right? So your salary is also based on your colleagues and what they're making and how long they've been there or not been there, or what their education level is.
So it's like you can't be making more than Janice because she been here for 10 years. Got you. I understand. So I guess the money is better over here. Another big thing to remember, and this is huge, huge, huge. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, go listen to it. I know it's long. I know it's just me talking for an hour, but I need you to remember there is no HR in this industry. We do not have the protections. We do not have the management. We do not have the oversight that other industries have. So when things go wrong or get difficult, it rests on your shoulders to either accept the difficulty or work toward a solution, which can be a daunting task. Jess, have you had experience with that realization?
Yes, yes, I have. Gosh, I have to say, I actually like talked about this on my Instagram recently. I have this thing that I've been doing with my nanny families since I have started nannying. I have this journal that I keep with my families, and I'm all about the journal because it prompts us for those tough talks, right? You know, parents come home, they don't have time to talk to you right away. We're just going to use an example here of a child having accidents at school all the time. We know this, we know between each other, this is a common issue. The teacher wants to keep talking to me about solutions. I don't feel comfortable talking about those solutions, but you're coming home from work all frazzled. So I'm not going to sit there and talk your head off. about what the teacher is telling me to tell you to tell each other, right? So I'm going to go on the notebook. I'm going to say, blah, 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 teacher wants to say this with you. I'm not comfortable talking with teacher. I think this is between you guys. So I wrote that down in the notebook. Mom comes home, a mess. I wrote this in the notebook for you when you have time later. Let's chat about this tomorrow or by the end of the week. I have just always luckily had that practice from the director that I had at the school, who just never had time to talk to us. She's like, write it down on this in this notebook. And then I will look at the notebook and then I will get back to you about when we could talk and then I'll schedule time to talk. It's just so I kind of learned that skill in the teacher world and I brought it with me in the nanny world because I noticed right away just parents don't have time to talk to you. It's seemingly ever, oddly.
Yeah, can relate. Can relate. And I think that's brilliant and a very, some would say, nonviolent approach because you provide the information pretty immediately, right? And they get to take the time to look at it when they're in a more regulated state. They have time to think it through, and then y'all can have a conversation. I like that. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
I have work from home parents now, but we may be moving toward that. That's a excellent tip.
I was just gonna say, and especially with babies, those feeding times and those sleep times that they had, you're not gonna come home and tell mom they slept at this time, they ate at this time, they slept at this time, they ate at this time. Yes, there are apps for that stuff. I don't love the apps. I am just very old school. I love writing things down. I think it's great for our memory. I think it's great for our communication. I think it's great therapeutically for communication building. So to even just write those down for them and to have a memento to look back on from that phase of their development. Let me turn to this page. They're acting so weird this week. How were they a week ago?
Mm-hmm. The first, I'll say 9 months of this job, I kept a journal like that just for myself, really, because my bosses are not minutia type people, and we talk like 3 or 4 times a day because we're in the same space a lot of times. But that was really helpful to observe as things like gradually changed and as she's getting older and doing different things and sleep patterns change and stuff like that. No, I agree. It's nice to keep a journal. And like you said, it's good for your memory and it's very therapeutic. Agree, agree, agree. 1,000,000%. And also for the no HR thing. So when it comes to issues like job creep, which we know is
Yes.
when all of a sudden your tasks have multiplied, when it comes to tough conversations, when it comes to performance reviews and raise requests and all those good things, that's on you, baby. There's no unbiased third party to regulate that or even to see to it that any of it happens, you know? There are some families who are not necessarily looking to do all this sort of communicating. There are certain families that they see you as a contractor, even though you're an employee. And so they don't see themselves as your boss, right? Who should not only be cutting the check, but guiding you through the job and, doing what they are responsible for on their end. So that can be, it can be tough. It can be a journey. I guess just be aware, be aware.
And then when it comes to things like not related to the kids, when it comes to like our personal needs, I would say still like, no, I'm not going to write in the journal like I need a raise. You know,
A little passive aggressive.
like I would say something like in person, it's been brought to my attention that I've had a few things change. I would love to discuss them with you. Let me know when you're available.
Mhm.
And then just kind of go from there. Right. That's hard
Yeah.
not have.
I'm a big fan of swapping. I'm a big fan of swapping responsibilities. So like
What is that?
if I never cooked and all of a sudden you need me to cook twice a week, I my first question is, so what task am I eliminating to prioritize this now? Because there are only so many hours in a day. But not everyone is amenable to that as well. You never know.
During the pandemic, actually, it was so odd. It was like not recognized that all of a sudden I was maintaining the kindergarten first grade schedule. I had to bring it to their attention. So now I'm a teacher. Can we talk about this? That was an interesting one. But I also always find I have found to be lucky in the way of parents really appreciate the transparency when you do have those talks. If we're just talking about my personal experience, I have just found that when I have been very, very nervous about talking to parents about something in that regard, I have found them to be receptive and positive, and that I really overthought it.
There are a fair amount of parents who see you initiating conversation as a sign of your professionalism and a sign of how seriously you take the position. So I definitely think you should always speak up. Just pay attention to how it goes.
Yeah.
You learn something new every time. I think another thing that Jess and I don't seem to mind, but some people may, is that you don't have coworkers in this job. And depending on the nature of your position, like say you take a position with twin babies, you may not have a lot of opportunities to get out and be among people either. So if that is something that you don't enjoy, if you need to be like ears to the streets, it's different over here. Like I said, I don't mind it at all. I will say COVID taught me nannies need nanny friends. You can't be by yourself all the time with a child, but last week it was just me and my baby for the most part, and it was fine. It worked for me. Another thing I will mention is emotional warfare. Now, this seems dramatic, I will admit, but it's very real. There are going to be times where you have feelings in this work because it's so personal. And you have to learn to manage your feelings and your expectations while maintaining professionalism, while making sure you're not being taken advantage of. And it can be a lot sometimes. It can mess with your head. I don't know. Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah. I would say Jess as a nanny in her 20s is way different than Jess as a nanny in her 30s. In my 20s, I wasn't extremely self aware of my needs. My husband and I, we've been friends since we were six. Led us to being roommates when we were 20. And we just kind of got thrusted into adulthood very quickly. So I say that to say in my 20s, I was so focused on paying bills and understanding how to live on my own and work full time. And so in the last 5 years, I would say the emotional warfare aspect has crept in more, that I am now more present in myself, have sought out therapy. I talk to somebody regularly, and I have also become a certified mindful nanny, which has not only taught me self regulation and breathing practices for young children, but also it was created for caregivers to learn how to essentially just take care of yourself while also taking care of other people. It gave me all these really wonderful tools of just mindfulness. This has become much more present in my life more in recent years because the emotional warfare aspect is very real. You give so much of yourself to the children and to the babies and to the families. You fall into a cycle of like people aren't recognizing what you're doing because everybody's now like comfortable and trust what you're doing, so nobody feels like they have to check in with you. Not only is it like an interaction thing, but you're absorbing the energy of the children, you're absorbing their emotions, you're absorbing the cries, the even like the octave levels, the loudness, the quiet, all of that is energy. It's a huge energy absorption, and we take that home with us, right? Some of us live in big cities where we are also commuting for a long time in really heavy emotional traffic. People are driving with their emotions from the day. And I have come home like a wreck most of the nights. My husband doesn't know how to interact with me.
That's how I end up spending 20 minutes in the car at night when I first get home, so I can get to a better place before interacting, because if I come straight in the house, my face is not, she's not sweet. And also, to add to your point, working with children, even if it goes well, will inevitably bring you face to face with your childhood trauma, with your inner child. And some of the occurrences on a day to day will trigger you, and you will have big feelings. And you, especially if you haven't, like, if you're not seeing someone, if you don't talk to someone regularly, you may not even realize it's happening, but you all of a sudden are short with the children. You have no patience. You feel irritated. Like, these things happen. Children will show you yourself
Yes.
in very big ways. And that armor that I feel like you can have in the corporate world, or even in teaching, because you do have to stay, consistent for all the kids and not get too wrapped up in one or two, that armor slips when you work as a nanny. You get close. You get really close. And so all of that you have to manage within yourself and still present as this balanced, calm anchor, basically, of a household, which is wild to consider, but even wilder to experience. So, definitely something to be aware of if you're coming over this way. And honestly, that is a different type of exhaustion. Your energy level mentally, even when I was in my 20s, friend, even when I was living in New York City, I thought I was going to be out and about with my friends all the time, living my best early 20s life. But I wasn't, because I was raising a child, and at night I just wanted to go to the gym and then get in my bed. It's just a different type of tired. I don't know. We're not allowed to compare ourselves to parents. I know that's not fair, but I think we can relate to some of the exhaustion that parents tend to feel. I don't know. What do you think?
I definitely agree. I definitely can say that it has made me, this is another conversation, but that energy and exhaustion, it has really contemplated my thoughts and like, do I want to have a kid and take and have that exhaustion in my life? Like I don't know. I don't know if I want to be a parent because of that physical exhaustion. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful to be experiencing it now to really put me in the position of like, do I want to have that in my life? But again, another conversation. But yes, to answer your question, I do agree in that regard.
Yeah. It's a different beast. It's a whole different beast. And I will say, like, for me personally, it gives more than it takes, right? Being a nanny is the only way at this point in my life that I see myself feeling like a balanced and normal human being. I think that anything else would just ruin my soul. So it's like, you take the good with the challenging. And I do think that we need more people in this industry who really love the work, who really love the children, and who are aware going into it. Because to your point about this kind of giving us a glimpse into what it's like to parent, I feel like if more people had a glimpse into what it's like to be a nanny going into it, they would be better equipped, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that is a beautiful point. And to wrap up this little chat, I wanted to ask you some tips that you have for someone who wants to transition into nanny life.
There are a ton of online courses and certifications that you can take. Very simple, 1 hour things. I would definitely look into some of those to brush up on some basic ECE, early childhood education knowledge, some safe sleep practices, basic nutrition. I think if you are somebody that doesn't already have that basic knowledge based on whatever you were studying before, it's really important to kind of hone in and learn those pillars to be able to help families. Families don't know a lot about like early childhood nutrition, basic education, how to implement schedules and routines, or what even examples of those look like. So just finding examples and basic trainings would be, I think, a great tip for people for anybody. I was going to say young people entering, but anybody entering really. Because I just realized too, like I remembered somebody like on the older side that just wanted to be a nanny and come out of like working
Yeah.
school for so long.
Sometimes it's someone's second act.
Yes, gosh.
Is
Yes.
there a time of year that you feel like is best for looking for a nanny job if you're new to the industry?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The end of summer, like right in like that July, August, even end of June, because
Mhm.
parents are wondering what they're going to do for the upcoming school year. So that's a really hot time to look for a good job. And that's a really good time to even like get a contract going because like if you want to go August to August, a lot of people really need that. Because starting in the middle of the year can be a little weird, right? If you start in December, they may only need you through to summer. But if you can start looking in the middle of the summer, then you at least can get a full year under your belt and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. If I had a friend who was talking about transitioning into nanny life, my biggest tip would be get your self care routine together because, baby, you're going to need it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Eat
a great.
well, move often, take care of yourself, pamper yourself, figure out what calms you. And this needs to be able to follow you through work and after work. So, like for me, my AirPods are my little besties. And if I am in a moment of overwhelm, I can put one in, just one, and have a podcast to take my brain off of it, or even like some music that maybe, because kids be so opinionated on the music. You're like, you want to play your music, and they're like, yeah, I want to hear blue. No, my music or a podcast, and it'll bring me right back to center. But it took me years to learn that about myself. So figure out your self care routine.
Gosh, that's a great tip. I got a little overwhelmed, I'm not going to lie, when you asked that question because I've never met anybody that has wanted to be a nanny before, and so the thought never occurred to me. And then also to that, this industry is so stigmatized. People
Mm.
think that it's a temporary job to get you to the next part of your career journey rather than like somebody entering wanting to do this.
Mhm. I think both ideas can be true and can be respected and respectful of the industry as long as you actually like children. Like, nothing frustrates me more than someone who wants to nanny for 1 year to get ahead financially, but they don't like kids. Girl.
And you know those nannies out in public, you could just see it on their face.
And some will tell you, some will be like, girl, I got bills. Like, this is anyway. But yeah, I do think we need more professionals in the industry who actually enjoy the work. That's why I think that former teachers, former daycare employees are often good candidates because, at the very least, you know what it's like to be screamed at by children for hours because that very well may be your nanny life. So yeah, I unless you had anything else to add, I think that's a pretty solid amount of information for anyone considering the transition.
No, this is wonderful. I don't have anything to add.
Well, that's been another episode of A Nanny's Life. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Jess, for being here. You're going to stay with me because we got a whole nother episode to record. And so next time y'all hear from us, we will be talking about preparing to transition out of the industry, which I am not there yet, but we're going to talk about it. So, once again, thank you for listening. I hope you felt seen, heard, understood, acknowledged, and I hope that you have a beautiful week ahead, friend. I hope that you take good care of yourself as well as, if not better than all those other people you take care of, okay? And like I told you last time, I love you and ain't nothing you can do about it. All right? Bye. This is